Your mind might not remember what happened in that room, but your body does.
Episode 1 of 1899 opens with the character Mara Franklin reading the first two stanzas of the Emily Dickinson poem, The Brain is Wider Than the Sky. The idea behind that is that even though the human brain and the mind that exists within it are much smaller physically than the sky or the ocean, it can contain them. It's about the magnitude of the mind's capacity to create, or to imagine, or to perceive, or to remember. The new show from the creators of Dark uses its first 8 episodes to examine what the mind's capable of and the way it connects us to our perception of reality. As the story unfolds, there are several references to Plato's allegory of the cave to drive this point home. Very simply put, that is about how what we perceive to be real from our experience can be totally different from true knowledge or understanding. The series starts out as what feels like a direct homage to the show Lost. It puts a bunch of people who don't know each other together in a crisis situation, and then slowly reveals details through flashbacks about what shaped them into being who they are in that moment. It examines how they choose to present themselves, what secrets they decide to keep hidden, and who they would decide to be if things were to get crazy. It's not just that by any means. 1899's characters don't end up on an island after a plane crash. Instead, they're on a steamship en route to fresh starts in the New World. It's a large cast of mostly Europeans who are diverse in culture, class, and the languages they speak. The catch is that by the end, you're left scratching your head as to whether anything we learned about these characters was true, and we will come back around to that at the end of this video. But before I get into what happens, I do want to address the idea of things taking place in a simulation because I think it'll be divisive. I'm a big fan of sci-fi and all the imagination that goes along with that, which means that over the last few years of making videos about TV shows, especially ones where it's obvious things aren't exactly as they seem, one of the first theories that always pops up is that they're in a simulation. Every time I see it, my internal response is, oh, please don't let it be that, because in theory, when you end that way, it kind of diminishes everything that happened on the way to get to that place. Here, I'm still willing to give the creators the benefit of the doubt. I think this could be a creative decision that comes from a place of understanding that and looking at it as a challenge they could take on. We'll have to wait and see, but the more I sit with this ending, the more I like that possibility. At the same time, it does make my job a little more complicated in relation to recapping the first 6.5 episodes. Were there an amazing amount of details that will likely be important going forward if it gets picked up for a second season? Absolutely. Are any of those crucial in understanding the ending of season 1? It's hard to tell. If the present is 2099, and that's a big if in a story that is obsessed with our relationship to reality, then all of the memories that take place in the 19th century are almost certainly false or tied to something that happened to these characters at a different time altogether. Also, Elliot, Daniel, and Henry all exist in the simulation. They appear to understand what's going on there after being through it so many times, but they're all noticeably absent in the final scene in the spaceship, so there's no telling if any of them are still alive or even exist in the present. What we do know is that the characters in 1899 are in a simulation that takes place on a ship called the Kerberos, making that journey to the United States. The thing that they all seem to have in common is that they're trying to leave their past lives behind in one way or another. They all seem to be running from something. We'll learn later that they're actually stuck in a loop that forces them to experience painful memories, with Mara being the exception since she seems to have forgotten hers. She believes her father Henry did something to make her forget, and we see a recurring memory surface of her being strapped to a chair and given an injection in her neck. Over time, it's revealed that there are 3 passengers who know more about what's going on than everyone else. Daniel, Elliot, and the ship's first mate, Sebastian. That last one is working with Henry, while the other 2 appear to be working against him. The first mate is there from the beginning, pulling some strings behind the scenes, while Daniel makes his way onto the ship from the Prometheus when they go to investigate that, and Elliot is discovered there as well. Daniel tells Mara he's her husband and that Elliot is their son, but she doesn't have any memory of their time together. We do get to see some of their memories though, and it's worth noting that she's in them. I guess I should say that because it's a simulation that everything was created. The ship and everything contained within is a manifestation of code. While that means it's not real, it doesn't mean that it won't turn out to be symbolic or even crucial to understanding the truth of what's happening down the road. For a quick example of how that works, think of the 2 syringes that are in room 1011 in the mental hospital. Initially, the white one makes you remember and the black one makes you forget. But when Daniel starts messing with the code, the black one sends Mara to the chamber under the grave instead. So while it's all made up and may just turn out to be a place Mara's brother Kieran is trying to keep everyone for eternity, I don't think we should write off all the potential clues that exist in all of the episodes that take place in the simulation. Even if we take it at face value that Kieran is a person that exists in reality that has different motivations than Mara and has co-opted the simulation she designed, that doesn't tell us much about why she decided on the specifics of the simulation, a steamer traveling to the new world centuries in the past, or for that matter, why she tried to erase her memories in the first place. One of the show's big twists was that despite the reveal of the modernish looking monitors at the end of episode 2 and the needle drop of Black Sabbath's The Wizard at the end of episode 5, Henry was not the simulation's creator. I'm guessing most of what Mara says about his experiments and his past are based in reality, but according to what Daniel tells her at the end, it appears that they are the ones who were creating the simulations. Apparently, at some point in his childhood, Elliot started to die, and Mara looked to technology for a way to keep him alive forever. They never come out and say it, but the grave and the fact that she seems to be trying to forget something traumatic appear to indicate that Elliot did die. With Daniel and Henry, it's a little harder to tell. As I mentioned, neither one of them are present in the spaceship when Mara wakes up. In the simulation, Daniel has knowledge about things outside of it. He wanted Mara to wake up because he said her brother had taken over the simulation, and he hinted that there was more to that when he said this is bigger than you think. The one thing that makes me think that he might be dead or that he may only exist in the simulation is that when she asks if he'll be there when she wakes up, he says always, which sounds a lot more like a reference to their conversation in his memory when they were talking about how everything you've known or experienced is all in your brain somewhere. It sounded like he was saying that he would always be in her memory rather than him saying that he would be there in the next pod down the hall or whatever. Henry, on the other hand, was actively trying to get the key so he could wake up, and with nothing else to go on beyond his fear of being stuck in there, at least for now, I'm guessing he does exist in reality. Regardless if Daniel is still out there somewhere in the real world, he's able to create a virus to corrupt the simulation, which is represented by those black growths that start popping up everywhere, and ultimately rewrite the code to stop Henry's attempt at waking up and allowing Mara to do that first. As far as we understand, at the end, the simulation is destroyed, or at least it didn't complete the loop to start over like it had in the past. What that means for those who were left behind is a big question going forward. I brought up the Emily Dickinson poem in the beginning, and I find it interesting that she doesn't read the third and final stanza, which says, "The brain is just the weight of God. For heft them pound for pound, and they will differ if they do as syllable from sound." That brings to mind the idea of a creator, the idea that the brain has the same capacity to create that God does. And with the simulation, you can't help but think about playing God. We can mostly piece together that Mara tried to use what she knew about the mind to create a place where she could forget and be rid of the pain she was experiencing. Henry tells Elliot that this is impossible. As much as we try to forget what we don't want to remember, we'll never be able to delete our memories entirely. They're a part of who we are, woven into our very fabric. He goes on to tell him that even if they delete the memories in this simulation, their senses are still reacting to the same triggers. The mind might not remember what happened, but the body does. He explains that the simulation isn't a prison that his mother is trapped in, but one that was built for him. And he makes it explicit that Elliot is trapped in this simulation so his mother can keep him alive. And while I don't think we should accept everything he says as truth, we don't know what his motivations are beyond trying to get the key, and he did seem kind of shady once he had it. But this all does seem to track with Daniel's memory of the conversation he had with Mara in episode 7. He echoes that same idea that one's whole reality is actually inside one's mind, that none of what we know as reality would exist without the mind experiencing it. We'll never know if the stimuli in our brain are caused by reality or a construct of one. And when you start to talk about it like that, you start to get into the territory of what is the difference of living in reality or in a simulation. In both conversations, the idea of Plato's cave is brought up. Henry tells Elliot that his mother's world was turned upside down by the idea that our knowledge has limits, which he came to from reading the allegory, and that we can never know if things truly are how they appear. He uses the example of God being the creator of our reality, and her response to that if that were true, then the world that God lives in would be the real one, and we're just his doll's house. In their conversation, Daniel tells her that in the simulation, she's like the prisoners in Plato's cave looking at shadows on the wall, and he wants her to be able to look over her shoulder and see where the light is coming from. By the end, Henry helps her to do that, even if she doesn't believe him. He gets the key and he tries to start the cycle of her forgetting over again and learns that Daniel rewrote the code. Mara is transported to the child's room beneath the grave, which he tells her is the first simulation they created together. Everything about it seems consistent with them losing their child and wanting to have a place to remember him, but it doesn't really tell us anything about how they got from there to what is happening on the Kerberos in that traumatic loop. Either way, for now, she seems to have broken free from that. She wakes up inside a chamber in a spaceship that appears to house several identical ones. Most of the important characters she met on the ship are there with her. She sees a card with the phrase, "May your coffee kick in before reality does," which sounds like something your uncle might have printed on his favorite coffee mug. And that phrase being printed in all the books was one of the clues that they were in a simulation before that was revealed. On a not very futuristic computer screen, we see the name Project Prometheus. We learn that the date is October 19th, 2099, and that there are 1,923 passengers and crew on what is described as a survival mission. She reads a message from her brother welcoming her back to reality, and the look on her face doesn't exactly scream, "Okay, now I remember what's going on." And we see the repeated motif of the triangle or the pyramid in her eyeball as we zoom in, and the season ends right there. There are a lot of obvious parallels between the Kerberos and this survival mission. And the same way I had the knee-jerk reaction of don't let this be a simulation on the first ship, I immediately thought don't let this be another layer to the simulation. I guess it's just the way I think, but after making peace with that first choice, I almost have to just strap myself in for the ride now that we're here. Could it be reality? Could this all be taking place on a spaceship in 2099? Absolutely. On the surface, it's just a long-haul transport that puts passengers in stasis so that they can survive on a trip that would last hundreds of years. This is something that you read about in sci-fi quite a bit. They would just have to connect a few dots to explain how Mara's desire to create a place to remember Elliot got tied into this seemingly unrelated endeavor. But if what Daniel said about Kieran taking over the project for nefarious purposes was true, then I would say it's a 50-50 chance that he's lying to her about being awake in reality. The one item that might support the idea that everyone is on a survival mission to escape a dying Earth or something along those lines is the repeated use of the symbol of the triangle pointing down with a line through it. This is the alchemical symbol for Earth, and we saw it all over the place in the design of the simulation and the marketing materials for the show. In the last scene, we even see that she has a tattoo of it behind her ear, just like the one she found on Elliot. That's enough to add to the mystery, but I can't help but think about that line from Dark. What we know is a drop, what we don't know is an ocean. And we're probably still not asking the right questions, which should make for some fun theories while we wait for season 2. So I did really enjoy the show. Maybe not in the same way I enjoyed Dark when I first discovered that, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I think the shows introduced their mysteries in very different ways. Dark had the disappearance of Eric and Mikkel, something that was grounded in the characters and how they were connected in that little town, and then it expanded from there. 1899's characters are connected in their desire to run from something, but not by much else other than they're in a confined space together. They all have secrets and they're naturally suspicious of each other, and that's before you factor in their inability to communicate. I know the creators were really excited about making a truly international show with these different languages, and I like the idea, but in practice you do lose some of what you can do with them, since so much of their interactions are just not being able to understand each other. It creates some interesting dynamics, like at the end none of them could talk to each other really, but when you add in that idea that these memories we've watched them revisit are probably false, like the things that made them who we thought they were leading into the finale, it does start to feel like you're taking some risks. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that if you have a plan that you think you can pull off. As much as I love Dark, I want to see what else they can do. And I would rather see creatives err on the side of taking chances. There's the chance that it might not work, but you also get a better reward when it does. I wasn't pulled into this world in the same way I was to Winden, but these characters are starting in a different place. It's a different feeling. It's asking a lot of interesting questions about how we perceive the world around us, how there is so much that's outside of our control even when we understand what's going on, and how hard it can be to let go of things even when you know it's the right thing to do. As a TV show, I think it's impressive on a few different levels. The cinematography, direction, and the intentional writing are things we already knew they could do, and those are all still there. And the performances came through when the situation called for it. The emphasis on the puzzle made it so that some of the characters didn't have much to do, but they all had some things that they can build on in future seasons. I thought the score was a little dialed back compared to Dark. I mean, that show had so much atmosphere, but I thought that gave it more weight when it did kick in. One thing that I really liked was the way they went about revealing things. They kept the audience on the same pace as the characters, and putting the viewers in a situation where you pretty much know what's going on, but you just don't want to believe it yet, felt very deliberate and just a great touch if you're planning on turning things on their head. I do have a lot of questions, so many that I think I'd rather get into those in a separate video. There are also a lot of details I want to go back and take a closer look at, so be on the lookout for some more videos this week. We're in the same place as the main character right now. We don't know how much of what we're experiencing is real, or what to believe. I guess not in the exact same place, because if we can believe Henry, in her turn at playing God, she tried to create a place where she could do the impossible and forget. There's probably a lot more going on, and I'm looking forward to finding out, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the season. What was your favorite episode? I think I probably got hooked in at the end of episode 2. I was a little disoriented with things maybe for the first couple, but from there I was pretty much like, okay, I want to figure out what's going on here. The simulation effect is a little bit strange considering how important every single detail felt in Dark. Like I said, I don't love this idea. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, and I would be impressed if they looked at this as a challenge they thought they could tackle, and they do manage to pull it off. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.